Good afternoon. I want to thank the Division 17 as well as the Fellows Committee for giving me the opportunity today to share my journey as an academic. And while I'll share a little bit about my research, I thought I'd kind of take more of a personal route today. So I'm going to share a little bit about how I came to be a counseling psychologist. I remember at a very young age, a girl of 4 or 5 years of age, I wanted to be an air hostess, a flight attendant, what we called them air hostesses then. The travel, the glamour, the possibility of making lots of money, where I would build a hospital for my sister, who was to become a doctor, and build a swimming pool for dogs. I know they don't relate. Were aspirations that I held through this job. I had a big dream. But life had different plans for me. While travel is still a big part of my life, my journey has been influenced by pivotal moments and some significant influences. I grew up in India and completed a majority of my education there. Being raised within a household that was middle class, I often heard my father say that education is very important, whether it was for man or woman. India, having been colonized by the British, took on the education system. And so grade school was very focused on rote memorization and being intelligent, or being what one might consider a nerd in the US, was part of the popular crowd. I was a mediocre student. I struggled quite a bit with this in the system, which allowed little creativity. What I excelled, however, were in extracurricular activities such as sports, dance, music, making my parents wonder how my progress through school, let alone college. Once you graduate from high school, there are about 4 choices or options: going into the arts and humanities, into the sciences, which is medicine, engineering, or what we call commerce in India, which is accounting, finance. Your grades certainly dictate your path, and once you've chosen your path, you're stuck. So career choices are primarily guided by grades. So you had to study, get the right grade in order to get into the right career. Like all other Indian students, I lived at home. Parents paid for my education, and the commuting was very minimal. In reflecting back, it appears that I did not want to stay home and study. I loved the arts and painting and drawing, and I wanted to be a textile designer. The program would have taken about 5 years, and I would have to have lived in another part of the country. At this time, my father was working abroad, and my sister was away in Mumbai studying microbiology. Because my mother was by herself, my father asked that I stay home and study. Also, he wanted to make sure that I'd at least get a bachelor's degree, given my poor academics, before I ventured into any other type of education. But a bachelor's degree would take me 3 years, and then to do another 5 years was not something I envisioned for myself. I did not want to be in school. I did not like school. So a dilemma presented itself that arose from conflicting desires and values. Should I make an individual choice or choose for the common interest of the family? Raised within a collectivistic, family-oriented culture, I decided to stay home with my mother and pursued my bachelor's. It was at this time that I met my first mentor, Dr. Usha Ram. She made a very big impression on me and what I would pursue eventually, psychology. She was a psychologist, taught clinical psychology at a local university. She was a strong and independent woman, and I really liked the way she thought and talked about her work. And I started studying psychology for my undergraduate studies, and I liked the field and actually did quite well, to everybody's surprise, and went on to get my master's at the university. However, it was a tough time for my family. My father was going through a rough patch in his job. He was the sole income bearer. And I thought for a little bit there that I would have to give up my dreams of completing my master's and my PhD. Yes, I had my whole life planned at 18 years of age. Very consistent with the Indian culture. Going to school, get married, have children, and then work or stay home. It was very easy to think very linearly. But life had other plans. While I was doing my master's, several of my friends started going abroad, coming to the US, and so there was a push to go abroad from my mother. So I applied to only one university because I didn't really want to come here. And remember, I didn't want to go to school either. But I came here, I got a second master's. I arrived in the US in '85 as an international student. And I dealt with a very different educational system, where there were a lot more interactions between faculty and students. There was a lot more focus on practice-oriented education, and I was more used to more of a theoretically focused education back home. In reflecting back, I think I had the best of both worlds. My plans would eventually go into clinical practice, be at a mental health agency in an urban setting. This took me to Philadelphia. I was in Wisconsin before, where my first job was in a methadone clinic, a difficult job that gave me a backbone and also a need to get street smart. This was my first job, part of my practical training as an international student. I made big bucks, 18,000. And I felt rich. The hospital sponsored me for an H-1 visa work permit, allowing me to explore the clinical scene. While as an international student, I experienced the excitement of being a foreigner in a new land, a sojourn. I stayed on the fringes, knowing that I would return to India again, that I did not need to immerse myself into the dominant culture, or to take on the potential challenge of being the other. But that was not to be. I met my husband, Blake. As I continued to live here, I experienced myself as the other, a minority, something that I had not experienced back home. The ideas of affirmative action, questions of skills versus tokenizing, discrimination, cultural conflicts, social justice, and issues such as this certainly came to the forefront for me. I see this as the period that shaped my initial research ideas on South Asian identity and multicultural competencies in social justice and training and supervision, but also my decision to pursue counseling psychology. I did not start my doctoral studies until about 5 years after my master's because I really felt I wanted to get a better sense of my goals and also to understand a little bit more about the discipline in the US. I joined Temple University with the plans of going into clinical practice after I graduated. But there was another turning point. I met my advisor, Dr. Nick Ledani, and I'm sorry he's not here today. But he has been a major influence on me and who I am today as a researcher and an academic. A wonderful mentor. In fact, he and I decided to apply for the fellow stuff together. What a wonderful mentor he is that he did this with me. And he's not here today. He even left me for my dissertation, actually. He moved just at the time that I was doing my dissertation, so I have imagined issues with him. He encouraged me to pursue my primary interest in examining issues pertinent to South Asian immigrant identity, despite the fact that this was not a major focus for him. And I'm very appreciative of him, and also just the fact that he was there supporting what I was doing. In having explored cultural conflicts, intergenerational challenges, intersectionality of gender, race, and ethnicity, I'm now examining the role of racism for Asian Indian immigrants. Given the colonial past with the British and the caste system, I see issues of racism evolving quite differently for this community in relation to other communities who have had a very different relationship with the United States. I hope to extend this research in examining how second-generation Asian Indian experiences with race may differ from their parental experience. And it has been a hard journey in terms of doing this research because it's not research that I've had some challenges in getting it published as well. So it's been an interesting journey in terms of doing the research and trying to stay connected to who I am as a South Asian. I also gained much from Nick in working with him in the area of supervision. From research on multicultural competencies in supervision to research on supervising international students, I've conducted multiple reviews of the supervision literature. Despite an increase in the research, the literature seems to be very fragmented and we have a ways to go. In 1997, Ellis and Ledani conducted a meta-analysis on the quantitative research in supervision and made several recommendations in better research practices. We're currently conducting another meta-analysis, the second one, to explore how these different recommendations may have been incorporated into the current literature, both qualitative and quantitative. And I've also kind of moved away a little bit from this area, and I've started looking at mental health disparities and actually just started a mental health clinic in a school-based mental health clinic locally by Lehigh University, where we train master's and doctoral students, and I'm starting to do some research in that area, which has been wonderful to look at as well. And of course, there have been other champions in my life, my students. Anju, Erin, Yoko, Matt, Lindsay, Abby, Sarini, Lavanya, Tiffany, Amanda, Valeria, Lynn, Asmita, and Ouyang, who joined me in my journey and really pushed me to who I am today as an academic. And of course, my husband, Blake, who is an ardent supporter of me and my work. Being a counseling psychologist has helped me stay connected to my roots and my immigrant cultural identity. My various travels and interactions have allowed me to explore the ideas of globalizations, notions of citizenship, and issues of equity. Through reflecting on my career, I believe I've lived my mother's dream of travel, my father's dream of education. I'm actually the first female in my family to have a PhD, and yet stay very connected to my identity as an immigrant psychologist, traversing several cultural planes. And according to Blake, through all this, I've still been able to be a good wife to him. And for someone who dislikes schooling, I have somehow continued to remain a student for life. Thank you.